Physical Sciences Lesson 15. Topic: Chemical Shorthand. Turn to Lesson 16 in the Learner's Workbook. Activity 1 includes a group activity. Activities 2 and 3 include pair activities. And activities 4 and 5 include individual activities with formative assessment. Integration. The concepts in this lesson integrate with information you gained in previous grades when you learned some aspects of chemical symbols and formulae. Prior knowledge. You have some insight into aspects of chemical symbols and formulae from work you did in grade 9 chemistry. You will extend the knowledge and skills you have with the information you gain in today's lesson. Lesson overview. In this lesson you will learn about chemical shorthand, study chemical symbols and formulae, learn chemical names, know that chemical elements are arranged in order from lightest to heaviest in the periodic table.
Hello there, and welcome to our next lesson in Physical Science Grade 10. Now, in the last two lessons, Tanika was telling you about matter and materials, and we mentioned there that elements and compounds was something we'd be talking about in the near future. Well, we've just arrived at the near future, and that is what I'm going to tell you about today. Now, talking about elements and compounds, where we're going to start is by showing you some of the names and in fact showing you the shorthand that we use to represent those elements. Now, in the 1950s, there was a very famous, in fact he was famous for only a short time, but he's very well remembered by people who once heard him. A famous American satirical singer called Tom Lehrer. And Tom Lehrer produced one of the most magnificent songs I had ever heard at the time, because he named every single element in his song. Now, he sang the song to a tune which he said was vaguely recognizable, in fact a very well-known tune. Some of you may recognize it, except that I'm going to sing it, and so you might not recognize it. Now, I can't sing the whole song because I'm not that good, but also we've got copyright issues. This is his song, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind if I sang just one verse to make a few points about elements. And this was called Tom Lehrer's Element Song, and here is the first verse. Okay, here's my rendition of Tom Lehrer's Element Song, the first verse. There's antimony, arsenic, aluminum, selenium, hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen and rhenium, and nickel, neodymium, neptunium, germanium, and iron, americium, ruthenium, uranium. Okay, now that was a poor representation of Tom Lehrer's song, but there are a few very important points that we can bring your attention to. One of the things you might have noticed if you look at that list is that a lot of the words end in IUM. That is because they were given Latin names. Now let's take a look here. Neodymium, neptunium, uranium, ruthenium, americium, germanium, etc. Now, one that I haven't mentioned, there's selenium as well, one that I haven't mentioned is aluminium, because of course this is an American song, and the Americans don't say aluminium, they say aluminum. Aluminum, you might hear that word being used on television, or if you watch the movies, they talk about something being aluminum. That's the specifically American way of saying it. Now, there's another interesting thing here. The Americans don't accentuate parts of the words in the same way that English speakers from England or places that are related to England do. So they will talk about antimony, whereas in English we might say antimony and put the accent on the first part of the word, whereas the Americans would say all the accents will be the same, so they'll say antimony. Now, that doesn't really matter, but it does make it slightly different on the ear, aluminum and aluminium. Now, let's take a look at a few more. Selenium. Now, that, as I said, has got a Latin ending, But what does selenium mean? Well, Selene is the moon. It was the name of one of the ancient Greek gods, I think, and it was after that because obviously selenium in its pure form is going to be a whitish, not particularly shiny material, but shiny enough with a sort of a whitish, shiny color. So it looks like the moon. Arsenic, that's got quite a different name or sounding name, and that's also a very ancient word because this is a fairly anciently, in fact, it's not an ancient element, but it's one that was known to ancient people and to alchemists. And of course, arsenic is very, very poisonous. We've got hydrogen, we know about that, and oxygen, and we find these two joined together in water. We know that nitrogen makes up nearly 80% of the air. Rhenium, that's an interesting metal and a not very common metal. It's pretty rare. Nickel, well, we've got quite a lot of nickel in coinage. It's one of the coinage metals, and we find nickel in coins. Neo means new. Dymium, I'm not quite sure where this word comes from, but you can see it's got a Latin name, neodymium. Maybe I should go and find that out. Maybe you can do it yourself. Neptunium, okay, Neptune. Neptune was a Greek god, and of course it's also a planet. Well, we get another metal called plutonium. So there is Neptunium and plutonium, which are named after Greek gods, which also happen to have planets or minor planets named after them. Well, uranium, another planet you'll recognize. Uranus, the planet, and uranium, the metal. A very radioactive metal, quite dangerous to have that in its pure form. Ruthenium. Now, these were named after places, and you need to go and find out what ruthenium is named after, because very often it is named after some place in the Roman Empire, the old Roman Empire. It might have a different modern name, but there is the old Roman name, and you will find that in some way that metal, ruthenium, was associated with the place after which it has now become named. Well, americium, no guesses for seeing who that's named after. This is one of the so-called man-made elements because it doesn't occur naturally, but it can be made in big atomic reactors. And of course, iron, very common. Germanium, clearly, that comes from Germany. And germanium is one of those very important elements which we mentioned last week. It is it's involved in semiconduction, and in fact a lot of the transistors and a lot of the semiconductor electronic material you get is germanium.